shoplifting figures. I mean, I feel like this comes round again and again and again. Once again, they are on the rise. But how do we stop it? So shocking statistics out today reveal that shop workers are facing an average of 2,000 violent incidences every day. I mean, just look at what you can see on your screen. And the number of attacks involving weapons has doubled in a year. The British Retail Consortium says theft reached an all-time high in 2024, surging by a quarter to 20 million cases, costing retailers £2.2 billion. What can be done? 0207 862 2222 is the number. Imarn, how would you solve this?
It goes back to police. We go back to hierarchy. One of the words that you mentioned earlier. Hierarchy. I think the police, because of the kind of the information that's been circulating recently, which is police won't necessarily come out to shoplifting unless it's under, please correct me if I'm wrong, if I'm wrong, under like £200. I don't know if you know or yet, but as far as I'm aware, there's like a certain amount that police just will not go out of their way because they are so limited.
I think the current government are trying to
fix that. Excellent.
But yes, that was the case.
Thank you very much. So I think that issue has been one of the main factors which has caused the rise in theft, because if there is no enforcement, if there is no consequence, you will try to get away with murder. And so, and I mean that literally, shoplifting is just the smaller end of the spectrum. So I think that we really need to get more police, and we need to make sure that that whole kind of public discourse about police don't come to supermarkets unless it's over or under a certain amount of money, get rid of that, and then we could probably start to kind of get back to an equilibrium in terms of tackling shoplifting. And then secondly, it would be giving slightly more powers to the security guards.
Slightly more to like security guards brought in by the shops?
Yes.
Lowri, what do you think? More police, is that going to solve this issue?
Well, it would certainly be a start, wouldn't it? I mean, the fact that you don't tend to see police walking about in the way you would have done a few years ago. I mean, Essex Police, I think, announced today they're going to fire a large number of their police support officers because they say they can't afford them. And those are precisely the people who are helpful in that situation. I think we also have to say people steal to order. That terrifying bit of film, that wasn't just somebody who was really hungry and wanted a pizza. They were clearing the alcohol and the cigarettes, weren't they, behind the checkout in what looked like a kind of, almost like a petrol station, didn't it, where they were all behind that. So they are selling that to somebody. Who's buying that? We have to realise if you're being offered stuff that's clearly been stolen, you're part of the problem.
So then the question is, if we have limited resources on policing as we do at the moment, Imarn, do we have more bobbies on the beat so they're walking up and down our high streets trying to stop people from committing these sorts of crimes? Or actually, do we need them working on discovering where these gangs are, who's involved in these gangs, and stopping the organised element of shoplifting?
OK, forgive me if I sound somewhat naive, but I would actually argue, to kind of connect to Lowri's point, some people are just out here, and they might not be a gang. That could be one individual who realises...
That was a gang, wasn't it?
OK, gang? All right, but...
That was a gang.
Ah, OK, I have no idea what incident you're referring to, but I can equally say, I can give another example in that there are some individuals that are not a part of gangs that will clear the shelves just like that gang member that you're referring to. And with that said, firstly, we need to acknowledge that people are doing this because of cost of living, so people are exploiting as individuals, not necessarily as gangs. Secondly, those that are having to deal with cost of living crisis cannot afford pads, for example, cannot afford baby food, for example, have gone out of their way to steal stuff, or they've bought the baby food and then they've stolen breads as a result. So I think all of these things need to be taken into consideration. So first and foremost, again,
sounds like you're saying that they deserve to
I haven't made my point yet. Allow me to just finish, please. I think it comes down to, first and foremost, making sure that we take into consideration the cost of living. This is why we have gangs that have been doing this for decades, and now we're starting to see the individual, just a bit like terrorism, right? We're seeing large scales of terrorism, and then we're seeing individuals. We're now transitioning into a very uncomfortable position in our society. So I think cost of living and more bobbies on the beat will make a difference in terms of enforcement.
I think people might have sympathy for somebody who steals a loaf of bread and a pint of milk. That's not what we just saw in that piece of film. And I think if you look at what's happening, it's much more organised than that. OK, you have the single person with a drug habit who's stealing to order. That happens. And then you have that, which is part of organised crime. And that's terrifying. That woman behind the till, you saw her get up and move away because she was absolutely she was a little woman terrified of all those guys. You know, that's I hope that they were caught. I hope they were prosecuted. I hope they were punished effectively. We don't know.
I actually don't know what happened in
But
that case.
may I just add one?
No, because
Go,
I need
sorry.
to go to a break now. We're going to be taking calls on this, and so we want your view. But now it's time for your calls on what can be done about the rise in shoplifting. Colin from Lancashire, you're here first. What's your thoughts? How do we stop shoplifting?
Afternoon, Storm and the team.
Hi.
A lot of shoplifting. It's all down to being drug related, and I think a lot of people complain and moan about drugs. If they legalise drugs, that would cut out all your drug dealers, and it would stop a lot of thieving going on. You go to Amsterdam, you go into a cafe in Amsterdam, and you can go and buy a slice of cannabis cake and other drugs, and there's hardly any stealing or theft over there in Amsterdam.
Well, I think
So
actually Amsterdam, as far as their drug laws are concerned, are trying to sort of roll back on that a little bit now, Colin. So, but an interesting example to bring up. What makes you think that it's all drug related? Are we saying that it's organised crime drug related, or it is addicts going out to steal to pay for their habit? Which one?
Well, it's a bit of both. I mean, there's always been stealing going on for other people that can't get anything in their lives, or they haven't got any money to buy things. So there's always going to be stealing going on. But majority of stealing is down to the drug side of life.
And you don't think it's got anything to do with the cost of living?
Well, it could be in some extent to people that are right on the breadline that can't afford to go out and buy stuff.
What would you say to that, Lowri? We just legalise drugs and then shoplifting will stop?
I think that's such a complicated issue, and certainly because we know in America, for example, where they've legalised in some states cannabis, you still have a black market in cannabis because the legal cannabis isn't as strong as the deciding at the black market, so it actually doesn't solve the problem at all. I think that, I think that better treatment for people who are addicted to drugs is definitely one would help. And the thing is, shops often know who the people are who are going to come in and steal. It'll be, the neighbourhood drug addict, they're in again. You know what I mean? But getting the police to take action, getting that person, you can get ASBOs now where people are not allowed into certain shops, and that often affects people who've got a drug habit. But that's only one proportion of what's going on. OK,
Colin, thank you very much for your call. Teresa from Lincolnshire. What do we need to do to reduce the amount of... And these are violent shoplifting instances as well. We're not talking about somebody just slipping a chocolate bar into their bag at this point. We're talking about people potentially using weapons.
Yeah, well, I work in a supermarket and actually somebody pulled a knife on me, a shoplifter, and police didn't even come. Police didn't... And I knew the person's name.
And why didn't the police... So presumably you called the police because that would be the most natural thing in the world to do.
Well, my manager did, yeah.
And what did the police say?
Nothing. They didn't even interview me, watch CCTV.
But did they say they were going to come... So the incident happened, you're there, somebody pulls a knife out on you. Out of interest, what were they trying to steal, Teresa?
Meat.
So they were stealing meat and you said, excuse me, you'll have to pay for that. They pulled a knife on you.
Well,
I'm hoping you just said, OK, take the meat. Sorry?
Well, I told them to, come back, and that's when they pulled the knife.
OK, and then they fled the scene while you were in shock? OK. And then your manager called and the police just didn't come because they'd already fled the scene and there was no immediate danger? Was that the point?
Yeah.
And they didn't even come back round to ask for the name of the individual or anything like that?
No.
So my question to you, Teresa, is and I think the panel are kind of in agreement when they say we need more police, we need more bobbies on the beat, we need more presence of police officers. Do you think that that's right, or actually you wouldn't expect them to turn up anyway?
Well, we don't expect them to turn up, but on another occasion, a customer caught a shoplifter actually coming out of the shop with goods and grabbed hold of him, and the police did arrive and they asked the shoplifter if he wanted to press charges against the man that stopped him.
Oh, Teresa, I mean, that's not making me feel like more police would be the answer then, but thank you very much for calling with your experiences and stories on that one. They were an eye-opener. Joanne from Essex, after hearing what Teresa has to say, do we think that more police are the answer?
Yeah, absolutely. But I just want to correct you on what you've got. You've got shoplifting is out of control. What you showed was actually a raid. That was a raid. Years ago, that would have been called a raid. That was not shoplifting. Shoplifting is where somebody goes in with no masks, then their faces are not covered up. They literally go in, put the chicken under their arm. I agree with Low. I'm sorry, that other lady, I think she was patronising. I think that she was saying, I don't know what you're talking about. It's not gang-related. Yes, that was gang-related. That was a raid. That was not shoplifting,
Joanne,
what you showed.
I think you're
I
talking
appreciate
about
that.
Imarn.
Thank you, Joanne. I appreciate that. And I did correct myself by saying that I had no idea what Lowri was talking about in terms of the actual example that she used. She referred to the screen. I was in my own world. So I just kind of went for kind of more broader kind of analysis in terms of just kind of making the distinction between what we see in our high streets, in our supermarkets, and we do see gang-related mass, big raids, exactly what you said. And then we also see the average person stealing cheese, hence why cheese, you know, cathedral cheese is in like a plastic wallet in Tesco's, right? So, and I would argue that that's partly due to one of the points that you made, which is cost of living versus a raid and gangs. These two things can work together, and that's what we're seeing right now in society, as far as I'm concerned.
But this whole part is an increase in violent incidences. Yep. So maybe not as violent as this, because this looks incredibly dramatic, but we're talking about people threatening. As Teresa said, she had a knife pulled on her.
So may I just add? So I think we're kind of missing a piece of nuance that maybe I didn't convey. Maybe it's come across patronising. I do apologise. Maybe I can find a different way to say it. What I'm saying is that if we are seeing this increase in violence with gangs, I would argue it is somewhat intrinsically linked to the fact that, first and foremost, police are not coming out unless it is under a certain amount of money, which then makes gangs feel empowered and emboldened to do more. So I think I would argue, personally, the increase in gang violence is very much centred around police not having a lot of police and not coming out. And then on top of that, they also can exploit those that are having to contend with the cost of living.
Joanne, thank you very much.
Making the perpetrator into a victim. Teresa had somebody hold a knife to her. There's no nuance in that.
No, he's talking about the police.
She was the victim. She was the victim, not the person who held the knife. I don't care if that
agree
person.
with that.
I don't care if that person is struggling for money. You don't draw a knife on somebody in a shop. They are not the victim. The shop worker is the victim.
I never said that. Totally agree.
James from Caerphilly, have you got any suggestions on what we can do to reduce the number of violent shoplifting offences?
Well, first of all, Storm, we need to stop blaming the police. Our police are literally under the snow. They cannot breathe sometimes. And for one simple offence, I say simple, it's not simple to the shopkeeper, but one offence of shoplifting can hold two constables for 8 hours. Now, that's the day gone. What I suggest is two things. One, a shoplifting bureau, which then does not encompass our constables, our police officers, having to go to a shop for 30 quid's worth of goods. This bureau will immediately take charge and therefore alleviate the pressure on the police. Now, for an offence of shoplifting, I would suggest, similar to driving offences, where a driver who commits an offence is invited to go on a better driving course. I believe the shoplifting bureau should have the powers to put the shoplifter on a better citizen course, and if they don't attend it, prosecute them with in the full extent of the law, because a person's income is being affected. The shopkeeper is going under. I therefore suggest those two things, Storm, from the outset.
James, I have to just, we've run out of time completely on this topic, but congratulations for coming on and giving me a suggestion that I have not heard before. That's going to give me some food for thought later on. James, thank you very much for your call. Do call again.